Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Eric Fields, the weight loss coach, and I am talking about some very important weight loss tips today to really help you. What you definitely don't want to do when you decide to start a weight loss plan, and I say that in a very general sense, right? A lot of times people they hear the word plan and they think it's going to be like a super specific, regimented kind of situation, and that does not work for a lot of people. That does work for some people. Some people are a bit obsessive compulsive or neurotic and they really thrive on a super amount of structure. And for those people, that's great. But for the large majority of us, we really just need some guidelines. So again, you don't want to just wing it. You don't want to wake up one morning and say, okay, today is the day I'm going to start to try to lose weight. And there's no plan whatsoever. You have no plan. It's like you're a ship at sea with no map. You need some kind of plan, or what I prefer to say, guidelines. Guidelines are not rules. So, what's the difference? Some of you may be saying, oh, this is a game of semantics. Here we go. I can't do this. I can't do that. Absolutely not. And you're right. If you start saying things like, I can't do this and I can't do that, that is a rule based program and that is going to fail. And the reason why it's going to fail is because each one of us has this teenager living inside of us who hates rules. And whenever that part of the brain thinks that you're trying to impose some major restrictions on it, it is going to rebel like a teenager. We don't want rules, they're not healthy. Now, guidelines for people like us are very hard to grasp. And I'm going to tell you why. Because people like us are all or nothing, black or white thinkers. That is our nature. So we are either on a diet or off a diet. We're on a weight loss plan or we're off a weight loss plan. And the diet or weight loss plan that we're on, when we're on it, tends to be very restrictive and, dare I say, over ambitious. And then conversely, we very easily flip to the other side, which is I'm off the plan, I am off the diet, and I am throwing all caution to the wind and doing whatever the heck I want. So, to appease this part of our brain and to make any weight loss plan that we develop successful, we have to develop guidelines, not rules. And the difference between the two, guidelines are flexible. We want to follow them the majority of the time because these guidelines are going to help us lose the weight. But we don't need to follow them 100% of the time. It's impossible. I would argue it's not healthy from a psychological standpoint. And often it leads to us going off the plan and saying, screw this plan, screw losing weight, I'm done with it, this is too hard. That's the last thing we want. So, how do we establish these guidelines? Well, I have put on this slide several different things that I think you really need to at least identify and define for yourself. Some of these are kind of basic, and others are going to involve a little bit more mental work in terms of you determining what is going to work for you. Remember, I'm a psychologist and I come from the standpoint that weight loss is super, super psychological more than anything else. So, with that in mind, when you are developing these guidelines, I don't want you to be thinking about what are the types of guidelines that are going to lead to me losing the most amount of weight the quickest way possible. No, 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 no. You want to be looking at guidelines that are going to be easy for you to follow and digest. No pun intended. You want guidelines that you can follow, that you're not going to look at as being overly restrictive or leading you to too much discomfort. Okay? So, the first question you want to ask yourself, and also, I should say, the other thing you want to keep in mind is your lifestyle, your job. Do you have the type of job where you're, rocking and rolling for 12 hours a day? Do you have the type of job where you're sitting down in an office for most of the day? Like, what is your job like? What are the demands of that? That will also influence some of these guidelines. So, the first thing you want to ask yourself is how many meals? The more meals tends to lead to us being more satisfied throughout the day. So, like, if we had a choice between a couple really big meals or like 4 or 5 small meals, 4 or 5 small meals tend to work well in terms of not leading to us getting so hungry throughout the day, but it's not always practical given our jobs. So, how many meals can I squeeze into my day? Trying to squeeze as many as I can in because I know that if I get too hungry from one meal to the next, that may lead to a binge episode. The second thing you want to ask yourself, what size meals? For this one, you have to kind of be honest with yourself and really think about the portions that you typically eat. And so you want to think about like how big of a meal should I have that would be a definite reduction from the way I've been eating and would lead to me not feeling guilty about what I eat. I tell all my clients and patients the one barometer you should always use is not what society thinks, it's not what your family thinks, it's not what other people think, it's what you think. And the way we determine that is by using guilt, that awful emotion, as a barometer. So think of it in those terms. Like, what size meal could you have that would be very satisfying, but you would not feel guilty about afterwards? Like, you wouldn't say, oh my God, what a glutton I am. Or, oh my gosh, I ate so much. I totally stuffed myself. That didn't feel good. Really try to get a visual on this. Okay, another question. What types of food? Also, I should add, we're looking at a lot of these questions in terms of degree. Again, we want to get away from this all or nothing black or white thinking. We don't want to sit there and go from eating fat fried foods throughout the day, many sweets, lots of salted snacks, and then all of a sudden we're eating carrot and celery sticks. and broccoli and whole foods only and couscous and lentil and kale and salmon. Listen, it's all about degree. So right now you're probably eating a lot of unhealthy food, and so where in the day can we start to change those ratios? Those ratios are so much more important than macro ratios, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. We want to look at this in terms of small incremental changes, like, what do you typically eat for breakfast? We're creatures of habit. Our meals really don't vary all that much as we think they might. So think about like typical breakfasts that you have. Like how can you make them a bit more healthier? You don't have to go from one extreme to the other, but are there certain foods that you can start substituting for other foods where it wouldn't be like a real sacrifice in taste? Look at your meals and look where you can start, trading in less healthy options for healthier options. Okay, cheat meals to have or not to have. First off, I hate this term. Cheat meal is such an awful, awful way of describing times when we just want to indulge and we don't want to be so concerned about how healthy the food is, but we just want to enjoy the food for its taste. And there is nothing wrong with that. From a psychological standpoint, it's good to have food just because it tastes good from time to time, as long as you're not doing it on a consistent, frequent basis. So, this really is like a tongue in cheek question, right? Of course, you should be having ice cream from time to time. Of course, you should be having desserts and treats from time to time. Of course, you should have a nice big porterhouse steak once in a while. Of course, you should have that big juicy burger once in a while. And yes, you heard it here, folks. Even a fast food kind of meal once in a while has its place in anybody's diet. Okay, so what you want to think about more is how often am I going to try to stick to these guidelines? Because they're not rules. So that's really the question here when we're asking, should we have cheat meals? It's how often do I want to stick to these guidelines? Am I aiming for 90%, 75%? And listen, if you've had very little success, kind of instituting any kind of guidelines into, your eating, then maybe 50% is what you shoot for at first. It's all a matter of slow incremental changes and starting to change your behavior. Again, cannot emphasize this enough. We don't want to do black or white thinking. Okay, macro ratios. For some of you that really believe in eliminating an entire um, macro from your diet, and that's going to really help you lose weight, I don't want to say you shouldn't do it. I will say this, it's certainly not necessary. You don't have to eliminate carbohydrates from your diet completely. You don't have to eliminate fat from your diet completely. And I even think from a nutritional standpoint that it's better to have all of these three macros in any diet: protein, carbs, and fat. Macro ratios is something that is a bit of a fad right now, and it's been a fad for actually a while. And there's just too much emphasis on this right now. One thing that I will tell you that I like to do is I like to do what's called carb tapering. And carb tapering is basically just what it sounds like. You gradually taper off the carbs throughout the day. So, for example, for breakfast, that's when we begin our day, and we're going to need a lot of energy to fuel us through our day, through work, through a possible exercise program, dealing with our kids, dealing with our spouse, you name it. So, I like to have a heavy carbohydrate, starchy carbohydrate meal in the morning. And then lunch, I still want some starchy carbs, but less so. And for dinner, I prefer to eat mostly protein and some healthy fat. But again, I'm not always eating like the healthiest of fats at night. So it's usually a protein and a fat meal and very little carbohydrates. The only carbohydrates that I'm really eating at night would come from vegetables or maybe some fruits. This is just a style that I like because, again, there is some science behind it in the sense that our metabolism starts slowing down as the day goes on, and macros like carbs are made to be stored. They're actually made to be stored even more efficiently and better than fat. So, this is a style that I like and it works for me. But here's the thing, just because something is backed by research and it sounds good and it looks good and it might actually lead to you losing more weight, if you find it too uncomfortable and unenjoyable, it's not worth it. And it doesn't matter what the science says. Who cares if the science says that this particular way of eating is the best way to lose weight if you can't stick with it? I'd rather pick some guidelines that I can stick with, that I may lose weight a little bit more slowly, but I'm not going to gain the weight back. I'm not going to say this, the hell with this diet. I'm done with it. And it's going to not even be a diet. It's just going to be a long-term lifestyle change. So that's my 2 cents on macros. Another question that you want to ask yourself is, what kind of exercise should I be doing? Again, this is a matter of degree and it's not all or nothing. We don't go from not doing any exercise to saying we're going to run 10 miles every day. Even for those of us who used to be marathon runners or athletes, you just don't go from one extreme to the next. It's not healthy psychologically, and most importantly, you're not going to stick with it. Do things gradually. And the other thing that you want to really think about when it comes to exercise is what's enjoyable. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. I don't care what the science or research says. Oh, this style of exercise is the best for weight loss or for fat loss, or this is the most effective, or if you're not doing this exercise, you're wasting your time. It's all crap, because if you're not going to stick with it, then that's the biggest waste of time. Focus on small incremental changes with exercise too, and focus on doing exercise that you enjoy. And if you can't find something you enjoy, then do something at least that you don't hate. Okay, this is Dr. Fields. This was weight loss tips concerning establishing guidelines, not rules. And I will have more to say about this at another time.